All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our unnamed podcast where we talk about movies. My name is Jared, and my co-host name is.
I'm Isaac.
How we doing today, sir?
It's going good. It's a good day to talk about movies.
It certainly is. I figure we get started more like with just saying kind of our film taste. Maybe start with our top five movies, and our top five directors. I'm realizing we didn't actually decide who goes first with that. So, do you want me to
You
go
take the
first?
lead.
All right, yeah, I'll go
Yeah, go
first.
ahead.
All right, cool. So I'd say my favorite movies ever are probably at number five. I would say is probably The Matrix. It kind of moves around. I'd say The Matrix kind of shifts around my top 10, but it's safe to put that at five. At number four, I'd go with The Shining, and then at number three, I'd go with Inglorious Bastards. At number two, I'd go with Alien, and one I'd go with The Thing by the lovely
Awesome.
John Carpenter, who is also my number one director. I figure we talk about top fives there. It's a little hard to give me an exact top five. I think, but
Mhm.
I like Carpenter, Friedkin, James Cameron, Guillermo del Toro, and Akira Kurosawa quite a bit. Those five are kind of my big dudes. How about yourself, Isaac?
Those are some lovely picks.
Thank you.
I certainly have a type when it comes to my absolute favorite films, but I'll just go in the format you did it. Top five right now is number five is Zodiac from David Fincher.
Yeah.
Big fan of that film, very formative. Number four is Oppenheimer. I know it's recent. I know that I love a lot of Nolan movies. I'm pretty sure at the moment Oppenheimer's my favorite, but in 2 days maybe it'll be
Yeah.
Interstellar or it'll be something else. Maybe it'll be The Dark Knight, Inception. I don't know. Love
Of
that
course.
guy. Top three is what I'm very sure of. I
Mm,
got top three is That Thing You Do, written and directed by Tom Hanks, which most people haven't seen that movie, but the
that's
people who
right.
have, they know it is incredibly charming. I'll fully admit it's definitely because I grew up with it, but I've rewatched it so many times. I still think it holds up. I think
That's
it's an amazing screenplay.
that's right. You
So
were
much fun.
you were talking about this one yesterday. I was interested
Yes,
to hear more of your thoughts on it.
I, it's hard to like quantify this one. For a lot of films, I feel like I can usually narrow down what I like about it. This one, it, it's just the ultimate comfort film.
I get you.
It's the rise and fall of a fictional band in the 60s, and they don't want to be famous. They're just like get sprung on them, and it's like a very fast, like over one summer, and it just encapsulates so much what I love about filmmaking, really, because it's it's just kind of perfect in its
Mm,
imperfections.
I know what you mean. Totally.
And then my top two are very similar because they're both from a certain director named Denis Villeneuve. Um, Number two was my favorite movie for a long time was Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
Love, 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 love that movie. And then very recently, number one, Dune Part 2, simply because reading Dune changed my life in 2020. You know, everybody was locked down, weren't doing stuff. I hadn't read anything in years. I'm like, I want to get back into reading.
Mm,
I saw the trailer for Dune Part 1, didn't know what it was. I'm like, that looks cool. I know that's a book. Read it. I will never look back.
word.
And Dune Part 2 is kind of everything I wanted from a movie ever.
It's I think I'd probably put that at number two for 2024. I really loved Dune Part Two. It was a really incredible movie.
I love that movie. As for directors, obviously Denis Villeneuve. That probably goes without saying. Definitely Christopher Nolan. Um, Probably gonna have to go with Paul Thomas Anderson.
Mm,
I watched all nine of his films last year. Instantly, top three director for me.
right.
Um, like just like my movies, I had a definitive top three, but like the four and five spots for directors are really hard. I feel like I'm gonna have to go with the Wachowskis.
Mm,
I've seen most of their movies. They are all 5 stars. I love their style. I love how they wear their heart on their sleeve. I love The Matrix. I love Speed Racer. I love Bound. They are incredible. And then finally, I'm gonna have to go with right now. I'm feeling Martin Scorsese probably.
nice. The classic pick.
Classic pick.
I think about the Wachowskis, and to me, that's the ultimate modern director duo. Just
I
the two who have the best understanding of modern stories, modern storytelling capabilities, all that stuff. That
mhm.
they are just the ultimate modern directors.
I think they were ahead of the curve and probably still ahead of the curve in understanding digital filmmaking and
Certainly.
like absolutely breaking the limits of what you can do.
And I think too they kind of predicted this whole comic book movie nonsense launch basically where obviously
Honestly, yeah.
Matrix isn't a comic book movie, but in a lot of ways that movie is like a superhero movie, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Matrix Reloaded is probably the best Superman movie.
Yeah, there's so much like Snyder's Superman and Neo, you know.
And it's
It's
awesome.
for sure. And we'll definitely talk more about it as we go on, but you said you've seen, was it 9 Paul Thomas Anderson films?
He's made 9 right now. I've seen all 9,
Okay,
yes.
yes. I've only seen one, which is There Will Be Blood. So that's definitely going to
That's
be an interesting topic for us to discuss throughout time. Because I want to see
that is
I
a
want to see
good one.
Boogie Nights really bad,
That one's
and
great.
I've heard Licorice Pizza's great too. So I gotta check
All
out.
of his films are great.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I know he has another one coming out soon with
This year, hopefully.
Yeah, with Leo, and it's like some big budget thing, right?
I'm saying it's like a action thriller comedy. Like it's like the most action he's ever done.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see that. Okay, so moving on to our next bit here, we kind of were thinking with this podcast that since Colin and I both really, well, Isaac, but I'm going to call him Colin because of our film
Either way.
Twitter, yeah, because of our film Twitter relationship. Um, we were both discussing that since he and I both really enjoy pretty much all kinds of movies, we'd make this podcast about any and all kinds of movies where we'd narrow down, maybe we'd talk about one modern film and then one film that is really from any time. It can be from 1898 to all the way to now, pretty much. And I think we would both do real well with that. What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, I think just the idea that sometimes people would like segment themselves into like, oh, we talk about this type of movie or we only talk about new
Right.
releases. But the way I watch movies, I do a lot of mood watching. I'm like, what do I feel like watching? I'll go
Mm,
to my watch list. Maybe I'll scroll a streaming service. Maybe I'll look through my physical media collection. Like, what am I in the mood for?
mm-hmm.
So I think bringing that sort of like, mood watching to a podcast is something that would keep it fresh
Yes, totally. And
consistently.
I am a fan of the nonsense double feature where you just watch two
Oh,
movies
absolutely.
that have no business being played back to back and you just have a great
hmm
time. So I think in many ways this podcast is going to be like that nonsense double feature, you know, and it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah,
And I figured we could start out by talking about our first new film of our podcast journey, and I figure a good way to start would be with the lovely Den of Thieves 2.
Pantera.
Pantera, of course, starring Colin Farrell and the great O'Shea Jackson Jr. Did I say Colin Farrell? It's Gerard Butler. My
Yeah,
God.
that's Miami Vice.
Dude, do you have any
I guess
idea?
that's a perfect way.
Do you have any idea how Miami Vice brained I am like at all
No,
times?
wait, this is perfect. This is perfect because Den of Thieves 2 is very Miami Vice coded,
And
and
you
that
know
was
what?
something I was gonna mention.
It's very Michael Mann coded for sure.
It's very Michael Mann coded,
Yeah.
specifically Miami Vice, because it's about two guys who don't really get along but are secretly in love.
Yes. To all the Colin Farrell fans out there, I'm so sorry. he's, I know he's not Gerard Butler. Trust me, there's two very, very different men. I
Very
understand.
different people.
Oh man. But so I love Den of Thieves too. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was a really, really good way to start the year. It was my first movie going experience of this year. And boy, it is just the ultimate dad blockbuster. Just like the first one, where it's just weird
Oh,
middle-aged dude
100%. It
having
was
on a weird time with a weird young dude. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I watched Den of Thieves 1 right before, like a couple days before to prep because I knew this was coming up,
Yep.
saw the trailer, thought it looked fine,
Oh,
you
I did
know?
as well. You know what? I'm remembering you inspired me to watch Den of Thieves 1 before it came out.
Oh yeah,
I saw
I
you
remember
on
that.
Letterbox post about it, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch the first one, and then I'll be ready for the second one. And I
Yeah.
loved the first one.
I liked Den of Thieves 1 just fine. I gave it a 3 out of 5, but most importantly, a 3 out of 5 with a heart.
Ah, yes,
on Letterboxd. That's what's important
yes.
because it really felt like a movie equivalent of drinking like Red Bull. Like I know it's not good for me, but like sure, it's like very much
Dude,
like
that's what Gerard
grocery
Butler movies
store.
are for me. Gerard Butler movies, like
Yep.
especially the modern ones, it's like I know
Oh,
this
100%.
isn't great for me, but I need it. Give me a little bit.
But I'll still be seated.
Absolutely.
So I thought there was some very interesting stuff going on in Den of Thieves one, like filmmaking wise,
Yeah.
but like I felt like the entirety of the first film just felt like pieces of other films kind of smushed together
Mhm.
and like a watered down version. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's the vibe I got.
Right.
But I still enjoyed it nonetheless.
Yeah.
Now Den of Thieves 2 is virtually a step up in every way because it takes a minute to get going, I will admit. There's a lot of character development, but then when we get to, like, the main action of this movie, it is it kinda blew my mind how good it was, and it made me realize that I would watch about 40 of these.
I know what you mean, dude. I wouldn't mind if we get like Den of Thieves 6 by now. Like it's a
Den of
lovely
Thieves 3 is confirmed. Den of Thieves,
Den of Thieves,
as they're
baby.
calling it, Den of Thieves is confirmed. I hope we get to move past a trilogy, and I would like this to become the next like Fast and Furious or something where they just get crazier and crazier and
My
they get so
uh,
far removed.
I was thinking like those cheap sniper films, like the original one with Tom Berenger. Do you know
I've
what I'm
been
talking
meaning to
about?
watch those for the
There's
reason.
like
I know they're
30 of them,
trash.
right? Like,
Haven't seen any, but I want to.
and a lot of them just go like direct to DVD, but they're very. I've heard like they're fun and it's like a good time. I wouldn't mind if Den of Thieves takes on that insane way
I'd
of
go
going.
into the theater to watch them.
Yeah, and what you said about the first one being derivative, I mean, in many ways, I think a lot of us just call Den of Thieves 1 Dirtbag Heat,
Yeah,
where it's like it's a lot less slick and just more about like guys who eat pretzels on their couch on Thursday afternoons.
absolutely.
But to me, that's a really fun tone. I really enjoy that stuff. I like when things are simple like that.
Hmm.
And obviously, I mean, Heat is a gorgeous action epic saga, and
Oh yeah,
I think it's fun that there's a movie out there that's just like, let's take the cool aspects of this and just water it down and make it stupid, but it still looks fun. And I think that's an interesting niche for modern studio films for sure.
yeah. I mean, it's very interesting how they can still find new ways to make dirtbag versions of our beloved movies
Exactly,
and still be charmed by them.
exactly. Um, my only thought with Den of Thieves 2 was I did feel like it was kind of missing Pablo Schreiber,
And I thought it was missing 50 Cent.
the lovely 50 Cent. Um, like I think Pablo Schreiber's role in the first one is obviously very substantial, but I think he's a really good presence for that crew, you know. And
Definitely.
they do kind of have Gerard Butler fill his role in the second one. And with Butler stepping into that role, I think he filled it like really well in the sense that he was still this presence that like was kind of like warming up to O'Shea, but at the same time was in it for himself completely, you know.
100%.
And that's one of the
That's
things.
actually something
Oh, you go ahead.
that's actually something I did enjoy about this film specifically is because it really does build off of the first film. Like they could have just done they could have just done Den of Thieves again, but they kind of flipped the script and really like developed these characters even more. And I'd be curious to see if they keep going down that road
Hmm.
by three, and we'll have like a actual good character arc across like a trilogy or 4 films or 20 films.
I mean, it does seem like they're doing something. Ugh, they're doing something serious here between the characters of Gerard Butler and O'Shea Jackson Jr. You know, there's definitely some kind
Absolutely.
of relationship forming there. I mean, I'm wondering if O'Shea is going to want just crazy revenge in Den of Thieves. You know?
I think that would be the best course of it. If we just keep finding new and interesting Michael Mann movies to make a dirtbag version of, I think we can keep this franchise going for a while. Because
that
as you said, the first one is Dirtbag Heat. This one is Dirtbag Thief and Miami Vice. So the
exactly.
next one's got to be three Michael Mann films
I'm.
in one
I would love
Dirtbag.
Dirtbag Black Hat or
Oh my god.
Dirtbag Black
That
Cat.
sounds amazing.
Or yeah, I think that would be really impressive.
I'd love to see Gerard Butler typing on a computer
Oh my
with
god.
his very thick
Just
fingers.
give me Gerard Butler on like a super like obnoxious LED computer tower with like neon lights coming off the keyboard and the mouse, and oh my god, I'll be in heaven.
That'll be so good.
It'll be so lovely. And just backtracking for a second, we kind of skipped over this. I knew Den of Thieves 2 would rock from the opening shot, and I think you knew as
See,
well.
I 100% agree because I don't believe it was the opening shot, but like the first shot we see of Big Nick
Oh, Big Nick, yes, but not
specifically,
right,
because
not the opening
it
shot,
does
but Gerard's
it does
introduction.
open on a fun chase, a fun little chase sequence through like a cargo storage area, which was fun. And I was like, okay, we're getting into this. But then we get reintroduced to Big Nick
Yep.
in the most dirtbag way possible, where he has a folded divorce papers in
Yes.
his mouth while he is taking a piss
Ugh.
in a urinal.
And he just appears like not hammered, but like just intoxicated enough.
He's like clearly still like hungover, but like enough to go to a divorce hearing or go into the precinct or go
Absolutely.
drive.
Because that was a really thing I loved in the first movie was that scene when he goes and confronts his ex-wife and her boyfriend at like the dinner party with their friends.
Oh, so
Like
funny.
it's so awkward and so uncomfortable, and I was part of me was hoping we'd get something like that in the second one. But when it opened on just the divorce court thing, I was like, okay, this is enough. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah,
That it just that all rings very authentic to me. It's very silly, but I like it.
I definitely was entertained from start to finish. And I mean, I'm looking at my 2025 ranking. Den of Thieves 2 is still my favorite film of the year so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I've only seen Den of Thieves 2 and Wolfman, so it beats Wolfman.
I thought Wolfman was fine.
Yeah, Wolfman's all right.
It's definitely a little disappointing after the amazing Invisible Man, but
Mm, mm,
Lee Winnell was still great behind the camera, and I believe I will watch anything he does.
of course, of course. But I think more about O'Shea Jackson Jr. And I remember, I think it was like 2 years ago now. He spoke about how he pitched like a series for his character in Godzilla King of the Monsters.
What?
Yeah, and my thoughts are just like, what if he did like some Den of Thieves kind of nonsense in the MonsterVerse? Wouldn't that be so awesome?
That would be about as good as the potential Fast and Furious and Transformers crossover.
Exactly, exactly. You get where I'm at completely.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like, would it be dumb? Yeah, and that's the point.
absolutely. All right, well, now we're going to move on to our next segment because we have not planned out any kind of cool transition, so we're just going to straight up say it.
Going into it?
Yeah, pretty much. For our first older-ish movie that we talk about on our podcast, we thought would make a lovely choice for the masterpiece Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me, which I recently watched for the first time. I think about 4 days ago now. And I have very simply not been able to get this movie out of my head. I cannot stop thinking about it. Every single scene is mind blowing and haunting, but incredible looking at the same time. It's a very fascinating movie. What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, so I had watched Twin Peaks last year in the summer, and so I had finished season 2 in July. So I watched it for the first time July of last year, and I've since watched it two more times. I watched it after I finished Twin Peaks: The Return, and then I just watched it last night in prep for this, and I wrote 3 reviews for it on Letterboxd, and I essentially said the same thing in different words, in that it is probably the most upsetting film I've ever seen
Mm,
in my entire life, and I love it.
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's a very strange. That's being a horror fan in general. You know, you
It's
see something really
probably
messed up, and you're like, "That was great." It feels weird to call it great, but it's just it's amazing.
absolutely.
You know.
It is truly the saddest horror film, but from a storytelling perspective, from a filmmaking perspective, and oh my god, from a character perspective, this is one of the most probably important films ever made. Like, people should be studying this film, not just in film classes. You should be studying this film in like college algebra. Like
Yeah,
everybody needs to see this movie.
yeah, absolutely. I I think about how Twin Peaks is such a surreal um thing, where there's so much of the fear is about the unknown, right? And these unanswerable questions. But at the same time, the fear in Fire Walk with Me is so authentic. It's this very real story of this sexual abuse and trauma, but wrapped up in this very surreal artistic thing. And it creates a very interesting effect that I think Lynch had better than anyone. Was just this weird idea of like what is the horror that is infecting the world, you know? Yeah, am
Absolutely,
I just like in
very
total
much.
nonsense land, or does that make sense?
No, that makes total sense. Like especially with Fire Walk with Me, it's very much um, like an indictment of middle class America in a lot of ways, because you would associate all these like horrible things with lower class, but that's just not the case. There's horrible things happening to everybody of any walk of life, and that's the whole point of Twin Peaks. Like you open up in this movie with her walking down the street to go walk with her friend Donna to class, and you can see, all the yards are trimmed nice, all the houses are beautiful.
Hmm.
She's the high school prom queen. Like she's meant to be like the sort of the imperfect encapsulation of like America in that sense.
Yeah,
And she's the one who is like the most tortured. She has been sexually assaulted for years at this point, and she has no one to talk to. She doesn't really have an outlet for that because she doesn't even know what's happening to her, because there is, a bit of magic going on, or
right.
or demonic possession, or is it who it is? Is it possession? Like we don't know what it is because Lynch leaves it so up to interpretation on purpose, which makes it horrifyingly unique to everybody who would see this movie. And it's it's really special. Something about like Lynch films. I've seen all the Lynch films, and they're not films that I like think about so much as more as I like feel them. Like I
That's
can
an
like
um
feel these
that's
films.
an interesting point you make. How it's so open to interpretation that it makes it unique for everyone, and that's a really incredible thing about Twin Peaks in general.
Hmm.
It's not just for X guy and Y guy. It is really everyone can find some kind of story in this whole messed up saga. It's very fascinating, and Fire Walk with Me is just like the terrifying red center of it all. You know,
Absolutely,
where things are
because
at
like there's
DEFCON 1 or DEFCON whatever the big DEFCON is.
DefCon 1, DefCon 1.
I always get confused. Is it DEFCON 1 or DEFCON 5? That's the bad one.
That's 1.
Yeah, there's never very
Or
clear.
maybe I'm wrong. I'm like
Who knows?
pretty sure it's 1, but
Yeah,
who knows?
either way.
The thing about Fire Walk with Me is it's it's okay. So Twin Peaks is already balancing a ton of tones quite expertly.
Hmm.
And this is even more apparent in season 2, where there's more of like the soap opera y, like, high school drama, or just like small town drama. And it's quite funny, but at the same time as these like funny scenes are like horrifying scenes or very disturbing scenes. And it very balances like all of that out. And the entirety of Twin Peaks, the first 2 seasons, you know, Laura Palmer is already dead. That's how the show opens. That is the inciting action. Everything is about the death of Laura Palmer. So we don't get to know Laura Palmer via Laura Palmer. We
Hmm.
get to hear about this character via everybody else and how
Exactly.
everybody else is affected. So when we go to Fire Walk with Me, and after the first 30 minutes, it is pretty much entirely told from her perspective. We finally get to essentially meet this character for the first time, but it's like we already know her because we've heard about her from everybody else. But then we can see, how does she differ? Like, oh, Bobby described her like this, but she's not really like this in Fire Walk with Me. Or like Donna described her like this, but she's not really like that in Fire Walk with Me. Or maybe she is like that, because it
Yeah.
depends what character knows her, what character doesn't know her. And it's, as much as we know her going into this film, it's really like we're meeting her for the first time. And part of it being like a prequel, like we know she's going to die, that she has to die to start the show. So it's sort of like this like encroaching dread all wrapped around this like character study of this tortured girl.
Yeah. Um, while watching Twin Peaks, all I could think about was how, like before I'd seen Fire Walk with Me, all I could think about was how Laura doesn't actually have any screen time aside from being a dead body and being in the picture frame. But for some reason, I have such a clear image of her in my head, and I'm for some reason so interested in her. And I can't really think of another show where I was just so interested in a character that was purely off of like secondhand information, you know. And
Yeah, it's
I
like
think the conflicting stories really enhance that and enhance the mystery.
that's what makes it so good. So like in season one, you hear all these different things like, oh, she was the perfect prom queen. And some people are saying like, well, maybe she was like into some things like drugs that she shouldn't have been into. And some people are like, well, she was actually working
Right.
like as like a sex worker. So it's like, well, who is Laura Palmer? Like it turns from who murdered Laura Palmer to who was Laura Palmer. And
Yep.
what's so great about Fire Walk with Me is as much as we want to know who killed Laura Palmer, we're also asking ourselves who was
Exactly.
Laura Palmer.
Exactly. No, I think the most s- I don't know if I want to say it, the scariest thing or the saddest thing about Fire Walk with Me to me is all of like the scariest and freakiest suspicions you had about Laura are confirmed to be true in Fire Walk with Me. And that's what bummed me out so much was like when I was watching Twin Peaks, I'm just hoping like, oh, this girl was caught up in something evil and weird. But I hope that like it's just like some misunderstanding, you know? Like that's what but part of me was hoping was that like she was just some innocent girl who found her way into it, but it's so much more than that. You know, it is how this world of darkness and evil just keeps calling to her, and she's drawn to it and it's drawn to her. And it's God, I could go on forever. I think I would just sound like I'm talking nonsense, but
No, you're 100% right though.
yeah, it's just
It's
it's baffling.
like from like the show's perspective, like if you take it at face value, like, you know, there's like these otherworldly presences that we see in Fire Walk with Me. I kind of see them all in the room, and they will like they appear sporadically in the show and in the return as well. But like so you're like, okay, well it's outside forces, but then we see her and she like aside from these evil forces that are out there, whether they're demons or whatever, she is still going and doing these things that you thought maybe she wasn't doing. Like she's doing drugs, she's like selling her body to older men when
Hmm.
she is a teenager. And a lot of that then ties back into like her being a sexual assault victim and just not having like she not having a way to sort of heal from that
Right,
emotionally because it's continually still happening to her. Like she hasn't escaped that situation, but she just like she tries to tell Donna, but she can't tell Donna.
right,
So it's like she has all this bundle up inside of her. And so when you have no one to turn to, no one to talk to, or if like this is something you're like struggling with and you have no outlet and no like hope in sight, no way to heal, like you just don't know because
right,
she's only like 17, 18, like she doesn't know how to deal with this.
right.
And
I
so she turns to things that would like make her feel better like in the moment, like she thinks it'll make her feel better, like she does drugs to try to make herself feel better. She tries to like sell her body to try to like earn money, or she feels that's her only worth when she has so much more worth than that. But with her being assaulted so like over and over, she feels like, maybe she's not worthy of love
mm,
because yeah, I could go
you
on
could
too.
no
It's
really you could go on forever, and that's one of the beautiful things about Twin Peaks, dude. Is we really could legitimately talk about this for like 10 straight days. You
and
know,
we could like totally change our theories. Like there are so many different theories about the show and like
absolutely.
interpretations that all 100% make sense.
And
It just depends like what it means to you.
this works to the one final question I want to ask you about Twin Peaks and the whole saga in general is, did the cancellation essentially enhance the whole thing? And I feel like it totally did. It's weird to think about, but it's this very unique piece of art that I don't know if we would have gotten Fire Walk with Me and The Return and all this stuff had Twin Peaks not been canceled, you know?
Absolutely. Like with season 2, they extended the episodes and they kind of like pushed Lynch out from directing a lot and they kind
Hmm.
of added in a lot of like what at the time people saw as like unnecessary subplots
Yeah.
of like, melodrama, and it kind of moved more towards like small town drama. It moved away from Who Killed Laura Palmer, and with it moving away from that, people kind of fell off the show and it ended up being canceled after season 2. And obviously I'm not entirely sure what Lynch's grand plan from the beginning was, if he had one or not. But with it being canceled, he had the opportunity to make this film, and so he had complete creative control over this, and he made Fire Walk with Me as a prequel. That kind of tied it all together, and then 25 years later, he was able to make The Return, which is 110% David Lynch, full creative control, and
Hmm.
he's able to sort of like reclaim the stuff that was like kind of like taken from him by the studio at the time of season 2, and it kind of folds it all in. So in the end, with it being canceled, because if it had kept going, it may have just fallen off and fallen off and fallen off, and we wouldn't think of it so highly. But since it ended when it was still like people were still, at least looking back, people are still very into it. We were able to get, ultimately, it took 25 years, but we got the truest David Lynch vision of Twin Peaks.
Absolutely. And it's we got this very unique gift that he was able to repurpose the meaning of Laura telling Cooper that she'd see him again in 25 years. You know,
Absolutely.
because I might be wrong, but I think the original meaning of that was the dream Cooper had, where she tells him, "My dad killed me," and he's
Hmm.
older, sitting in the chair. But and then that was repurposed to mean, in 25 years, I'm gonna come find you in the Black Lodge and tell you it's time to leave. Right.
Yeah,
It's
definitely feels like
it's
it
fascinating.
works perfectly,
It does.
but you
Yep.
can tell it probably wasn't the original plan. But then with it being repurposed, it kind of turned into kind of like the perfect sort of like continuation of the story, and then ultimately like a very very insane conclusion. I know you haven't finished The Return, but The
Yeah.
Return has an incredible ending. And with David Lynch sadly passing, was it last month now? Like
I think
5 weeks
so.
ago,
Yeah.
6 weeks ago? Is it already 6 weeks? Or am I
Yeah.
wrong? 5 weeks, 4 weeks? It's been a few weeks, but with The Return being the final sort of like, I believe that was his final project.
Yeah. It was.
Um,
It wasn't supposed to be.
it-
He was working some with Netflix, but they canceled
it's
it.
working on something, and
Yeah.
Netflix canceled it. But like ultimately, what a perfect way to end a filmography than with Twin Peaks: The Return.
Absolutely. It's a little magical bow for sure. All right. Well, that kind of wraps up our Fire Walk with Me portion. I really enjoyed talking about that movie. Honestly think I could talk about it forever with you, bro.
Could
Um,
probably start an entire podcast dissecting Twin Peaks and Firewalk with Me
and
and The Return
there are entire podcasts for that. So,
for a reason.
all right. I think before we leave, I think we just quickly mention some movies that we're thinking about watching. Like, what's in the top of your watch list right now, sir?
Well, personally, the thing, like I said, I like to mood watch, so sometimes I just kind of watch whatever I feel like, but
Mm,
I definitely 100% really want to start getting into David Cronenberg's filmography because I have
totally.
very, very ashamed to say I've seen none of his movies,
You're missing
and
out.
I'm missing out, and I would like to correct that.
I think I've seen 9 Cronenbergs. All 9 of them are incredible. He's a master.
Very
Um,
excited to see.
and for myself, I definitely have a lot of movies on my watch list right now, but at the top is just more of the Den of Thieves, Gerard Butler slop. I don't know why, but I am just in the mood for more of that dude doing nonsense. I have the Has Fallen trilogy currently sitting on a watch list across like 2 different apps, and then I have Greenland, which is the movie that I've heard is not good for many people, but I just want to see it.
But don't worry, it's getting a
It
sequel,
is getting a sequel, so let's see what
which
happens.
I cannot fathom. I
Yeah,
haven't seen the movie, but I remember when it was coming out. It's about, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about an asteroid hitting the Earth. So
I
it's
think
just a
so.
disaster movie.
Yeah.
Like, where do you go from? the Earth has been destroyed. I guess by the fact there's a sequel, I
Yeah.
guess it means the Earth's fine
There's
in
two
some
more
capacity.
asteroids coming.
There's 2 asteroids, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. I think that's gonna do it for us. I had a good time doing this column. How about you, sir?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think there's always more movies to talk about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully we'll get back to another episode. I don't know soon. We'll see. All right.
Yeah,
Goodbye, everyone.
see ya.